Friends, today we are going to talk about a film that teaches us a powerful lesson about life. Sometimes loneliness itself can become the greatest test a person has to face. The movie we are discussing today is Cast Away, where Tom Hanks plays the character of Chuck Noland, a man who becomes stranded on a deserted island and struggles to survive there completely on his own for 4 long years. The story begins with the FedEx Courier Company, a company that is known all over the world for its fast and reliable delivery service. Working in this company is Chuck Noland, a man who takes time very seriously. For Chuck, every second has value, and he believes that time should never be wasted. His life follows a simple rule: every parcel must reach its destination on time, no matter how difficult the situation may be. Because of his dedication, Chuck travels to different countries and visits FedEx branches across the world. There he trains employees and explains the importance of time management. He tells them that if even one package arrives late, it can damage the trust people have in the company. His words motivate the employees because Chuck himself is someone who connects everything in life with discipline, deadlines, and perfection. Along with his work, there is also a very special person in Chuck's life. Her name is Kelly, and Chuck loves her deeply. They have been in a relationship for many years and care for each other very much. However, Chuck's work keeps him extremely busy. Sometimes he is in one country, and sometimes he is traveling to another branch in a different part of the world. His life is always surrounded by flights, packages, and strict deadlines. Kelly wants to marry Chuck, and Chuck also wants the same future with her. But because of his demanding work schedule, he has never been able to move their relationship forward. Now the story reaches the Christmas season. There is happiness and celebration everywhere, but for Chuck this time becomes a little difficult. Suddenly Chuck has to leave for Malaysia because an urgent problem has come up in the FedEx company. Kelly wants him to stay and spend the holiday with her, but Chuck reassures her and promises that he will return by New Year's Eve, no matter what happens. Before Chuck leaves, Kelly gives him a very special gift. It is a wristwatch. Inside the watch there is a small photograph of Kelly, so that whenever Chuck looks at it, he will remember her and their love. Chuck smiles as he wears the watch and says that it will become his lucky charm. Kelly hugs him warmly, and soon Chuck leaves for Malaysia. Chuck begins his journey on a FedEx cargo plane with only a few crew members on board. While the plane is flying over the Pacific Ocean, the weather suddenly changes. Dark clouds appear and a violent storm begins. The plane starts shaking badly as powerful winds surround it. Within moments, the situation becomes worse. The aircraft loses control and finally crashes into the ocean. Everyone on the plane dies except Chuck. Surrounded by huge waves and the chaos of the storm, Chuck somehow survives by floating on an emergency life raft. After drifting for some time, Chuck loses consciousness. When he finally wakes up, he realizes that he has reached a deserted island. Everywhere around him, there is nothing but the endless ocean and empty land. The island has a few coconut trees and rocky hills, but there are no people anywhere. Chuck shouts loudly for help, hoping someone might hear him, but no one answers. In desperation, he writes the word "help" in large letters on the sand so that airplanes flying nearby might see it and rescue him. However, the next morning he discovers that the waves of the ocean have washed the word away. Instead of giving up, Chuck collects branches from nearby coconut trees and writes the word "help" again in huge letters on the beach, believing that someone will eventually come searching for him. Some FedEx packages from the crash have also washed ashore with him, but unfortunately none of them contain anything useful to eat or drink. Sometimes Chuck begins to hear strange sounds around him, but whenever he looks around carefully, there is no one anywhere on the island. Suddenly a coconut falls from a tree right in front of him. At that moment, Chuck realizes that coconuts might be his only source of drinking water, because the salty water of the ocean cannot be consumed. Chuck starts collecting many raw coconuts from the ground, hoping they will help him survive, but breaking them open again and again to open them. It takes a lot of effort, but finally he learns how to pierce a small hole in the coconut and drink the water inside. By now, Chuck has already spent 2 or 3 days on the island. He has no shoes, and whenever he walks near the water, the sharp stones on the shore begins to flow. To protect himself, Chuck tears his pants and wraps the cloth around his feet so that walking becomes a little easier. While exploring the island one day, Chuck notices a tall cliff nearby. He decides to climb to the top so he can observe the island and the ocean from above. When he finally reaches the top, he suddenly notices something floating in the water. Chuck quickly climbs down and rushes toward the object. When he reaches it, he discovers that it is the dead body of the pilot from the crashed plane. Seeing this makes Chuck very sad. He respectfully buries the pilot on the island. Before doing so, he keeps the pilot's shoes and flashlight because he knows these items may help him survive. Now many days have passed on the island. Chuck is completely alone, but slowly he begins learning how to live in this harsh place. At night, he notices drops of water collecting on leaves, and he pours them into coconuts to drink later. To satisfy his hunger, Chuck also begins learning how to catch fish. He sharpens a wooden stick, turning it into a spear, and tries to catch fish in the shallow water. At first, he fails many times, but Chuck refuses to give up. Slowly and patiently, he learns how to survive on the island and arrange food and water for himself. One night, Chuck is sitting alone on the island. Darkness surrounds him from every direction. The only sound he can hear is the waves of the ocean. Suddenly, he notices something far away in the sea. It is a ship passing in the distance. The moment Chuck sees the ship, he becomes extremely excited. For the first time, he feels that rescue might be possible. He immediately starts shouting loudly and waving his hands. He also switches on his flashlight and tries to signal the ship, hoping that someone on board might notice him. But unfortunately, the ship is too far away. No one is able to see Chuck's signals. Slowly, the ship disappears into the darkness of the ocean, leaving Chuck alone once again. The next morning, Chuck makes an important decision. He realizes that waiting for someone to rescue him may never work. If he wants to survive, he must try to escape the island on his own. Using a small boat and the materials available around him, Chuck prepares to push the boat into the ocean. With courage and determination, he climbs onto the boat and slowly begins moving away from the island toward the deep sea. But as soon as he approaches the stronger waves, the ocean becomes extremely dangerous. Powerful waves and stormy winds begin to push the boat back toward the shore. The waves are so strong that Chuck's boat flips over and he falls into the water. When Chuck tries to stand up again, a sharp rock badly injures his leg. Blood begins flowing from the wound. Somehow, in great pain and exhaustion, Chuck manages to crawl back to the shore. Just then, heavy rain begins to fall. To protect himself from the rain, Chuck hides inside a nearby cave. The cave is dark, and outside the rain continues pouring heavily. Chuck turns on his flashlight and sits quietly in a corner, completely tired. After some time, he slowly falls asleep there. Later, Chuck remembers the FedEx packages that had washed ashore after the crash. He goes back to the beach and begins opening the boxes one by one. Inside the first box, he finds videotapes. In another box, he discovers a pair of ice skates. In the third box, there are some clothes and a rope. In one of the packages, Chuck finds a volleyball with the name Wilson written on it. He also discovers a pair of ice skates. Chuck quickly realizes that the sharp metal blades of the skates can be very useful. Using the blades, he begins opening coconuts more easily so he can drink their water. After that, Chuck picks up a long wooden stick. With the help of the skating blade, he carefully sharpens the end of the stick. Slowly, he keeps cutting and shaping the wood until the stick becomes sharp like a spear. Now Chuck uses this spear to try catching fish in the shallow water. In the beginning, he fails again and again. The fish catches first fish. Now Chuck has fish and crabs to eat, but there is still another problem. He has no fire to cook the food. Chuck starts searching for dry sticks and tries to create fire by rubbing them together. At first, nothing happens except painful blisters forming on his hands. Later, while cutting a coconut, Chuck suddenly realizes something. Maybe fire can be created if two different types of wood are used in the right way. With this idea, he tries again, this time using dry grass and the correct wooden sticks. After repeated attempts, a small spark finally appears. Slowly, the spark turns into a small flame, and at last Chuck succeeds in making fire. Overjoyed, Chuck begins jumping and shouting with happiness. For the first time since arriving on the island, a smile appears on his face along with a sense of relief. Chuck then presses his injured hand and uses the blood to draw a face on the volleyball. Gradually, the volleyball begins to look like a human face with eyes and a mouth. Chuck starts talking to it as if it were a real person. He names the volleyball Wilson. However, Chuck is still suffering from a terrible toothache. Every time he eats, the pain in his jaw becomes unbearable. One night, while sitting alone in the cave and struggling with the pain, Chuck realizes that he must finally do something about it. Chuck gathers his courage, picks up the blade from the ice skates, and strikes his painful tooth with all his strength. In an instant, a sharp wave of pain spreads through his entire body. Chuck screams loudly and collapses unconscious on the floor of the cave. All around him, there is darkness. Only the faint glow of the fire can be seen, and the sound of his heavy breathing fills the cave. As time passes, for long years go by. During this time, Chuck has completely changed. He is no longer the same man who once lived in the city. Now he has become a part of the wild island. His hair and beard have grown long, and his body has become stronger from constant struggle. Chuck now knows how to catch fish, hunt crabs, and light a fire whenever he needs it. These things have become part of his daily routine. Throughout these years, his only companion has been Wilson. Chuck talks to Wilson every day and shares his thoughts with him. For Chuck, Wilson is no longer just a volleyball. Wilson has become his friend and emotional support on the lonely island. One day, Chuck is sitting near the shore eating food with Wilson beside him. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound coming from the ocean. Curious, Chuck quickly stands up and looks toward the water. There he notices something shining and floating in the sea. When he looks closely, he realizes it is a large steel sheet drifting in the water. At that moment, Chuck understands something important. If he uses this metal sheet wisely, it might help him escape from the island. Chuck immediately decides that no matter how difficult it may be, he will find a way to leave this place. He plans to use the steel sheet as part of a raft. For that, he first needs wood, so he begins cutting coconut trees and gathering strong logs. Slowly and carefully, he collects the wood and builds a rough raft that may finally help him travel into the open sea. Chuck places the steel sheet on top of the raft so that he can use it like a sail. After finishing the raft, he does not leave immediately. Instead, he waits patiently for the right moment, because he knows that the direction of the wind will decide whether he survives or not. After a long wait, the wind finally begins to change direction. Chuck realizes that this is the opportunity he has been waiting for. Without wasting time, he climbs onto the raft he built with so much effort and takes his companion Wilson with him. Slowly, the raft begins moving away from the island and toward the open sea. As it moves farther, powerful waves and strong ocean currents begin hitting the raft. Chuck must use all his strength and courage to control it. He carefully adjusts the steel sheet so the wind pushes the raft forward. Again and again, the waves crash against the raft. Several times it almost turns over, but Chuck refuses to give up. After a long and exhausting struggle, he finally manages to cross the dangerous waves that once kept him trapped on the island. Now Chuck is finally in the open ocean. The island slowly disappears behind him, and for the first time in years, he feels a sense of freedom and hope. At first, everything seems calm and peaceful, but suddenly the weather begins to change again. Heavy rain starts falling, and strong winds shake the raft. The waves grow larger and more violent. Chuck struggles to keep control of the raft and hold on to Wilson at the same time. But during a sudden jolt from the storm, something terrible happens. Wilson slips from the raft and falls into the ocean. When Chuck sees Wilson floating away, he immediately jumps into the water to save him. The powerful waves surround him as he swims with all his strength, trying desperately to reach his only companion. But the ocean currents are too strong. Wilson drifts farther and farther away. Chuck shouts and waves his hands, but in the heavy rain and storm, Wilson slowly disappears into the vast ocean. Completely exhausted, Chuck climbs back onto the raft. Heartbroken and overwhelmed with loneliness, he begins to cry. After losing the only friend who kept him company for 4 long years, Chuck once again finds himself alone in the endless ocean. It is night, and the ocean is still rough. Suddenly, a huge whale appears in the water near Chuck's raft. At first, Chuck becomes frightened, because he has never seen such a giant creature through its slow movements. It almost feels as if the whale is telling Chuck not to be afraid. In the middle of the vast ocean, this strange moment gives Chuck a small sense of comfort. Several days pass. Chuck becomes extremely weak from exhaustion and loneliness. One day, he falls into a deep sleep on the raft while drifting across the sea. Suddenly, he feels drops of water hitting his face. Chuck wakes up and looks around. In front of him, he sees the same giant whale again. The whale moves in the water as if it is signaling him to look somewhere. Chuck follows its movement and focuses on the distance. Far away in the ocean, he notices a bright light. After looking carefully, he realizes that it is a cargo ship passing nearby. A spark of hope appears in Chuck's eyes. For the first time in many days, he begins to smile. Soon the officers on the ship also notice him drifting in the ocean. Now it becomes clear that Chuck will finally be rescued. After everything he has suffered, Chuck safely returns home. But when he enters his house, he realizes that everything has changed. His family believed that he died in the plane crash and had already performed his funeral ceremony. Chuck feels deeply shocked when he learns this. But the biggest shock comes when he discovers that Kelly has married someone else. Chuck survived the island and returned home, yet the love he once had is now gone. Kelly has started a new life and now has a daughter. When Chuck meets her, Kelly becomes emotional and happy to see him alive. But she also knows that her life has moved forward and she now belongs to another family. Kelly realizes that she cannot leave with Chuck anymore because her life has moved forward and she now has a family of her own. Chuck understands this reality as well. Before leaving, he gives Kelly back the watch that she had once given him as a gift. However, Chuck keeps her photograph from inside the watch so that the memories of their love will always remain with him. As Chuck starts to leave, Kelly suddenly runs after his car. She stops him, hugs him tightly, and tells him that she still loves him. For a moment, they both sit silently in the car and look at each other. Their eyes are filled with emotion, memories, and pain. But after a few moments, Chuck gently tells her that she should go back home. Later, Chuck sits with one of his old friends and talks about the time he spent alone on the island. In a quiet voice, he admits that there were moments when he almost gave up hope. At one point, he had even thought about ending his life because the loneliness was unbearable. But just when he was about to lose hope completely, Kelly's face appeared in his mind. She became the reason he kept fighting to stay alive. Chuck told himself that he could not give up because one day he had to return to her. Every morning, he remembered her smile. Every night, he remembered her voice. Those memories helped him survive the painful loneliness of the island. But now everything has changed. Chuck has finally returned home, yet Kelly is living a different life. He had believed that everything would be the same when he came back, but now he realizes that life sometimes moves forward without waiting for anyone. Near the end of the story, Chuck still has one last package with him. It is the same package that he saved from the island years ago. The box has a symbol of angel wings on it. Chuck decides to complete his duty and deliver the package himself. When he arrives at the house where the package belongs, no one is there. So he gently places the package at the door and leaves a short note. On the note he writes, "This package saved my life." After leaving the house, Chuck slowly drives away. After some time, he reaches a lonely crossroads where 4 different roads stretch in different directions. Chuck stops his car and stands there for a moment, quietly thinking about where his life should go next. While he is standing there, a woman arrives in a pickup truck. She smiles and asks him politely if he is lost. Chuck smiles back with a calm expression and says that he is actually trying to decide which road he should take. The woman kindly explains where each of the roads leads and then drives away. As Chuck watches her truck disappear down the road, he notices something interesting. On the back of her truck, there is the same symbol of angel wings. It is the exact same symbol that was printed on the package Chuck had just delivered a little earlier. Chuck slowly realizes that the woman is actually Bettina, the owner of the house where he had left that mysterious package. At the beginning of the film, that same house was shown with the name Dick and Bettina written outside. But when Chuck returned there after 4 long years, only Bettina's name remained. This quietly suggests that she may also be living alone now. In the final moment, Chuck looks around at all 4 roads once more. Then his eyes slowly turn toward the direction where Bettina had driven away. A gentle smile appears on his face, showing that after everything he has been through, hope has finally returned to his life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more movie explanations.